Welcome back to the Church Law Podcast, where faith meets practical leadership and legal wisdom. I'm your host, Erika Cole, known as the Church Attorney, and today we have a truly inspiring guest. Nicole Baker Fulgham has dedicated her career to advancing educational equity, shaping philanthropy, and elevating justice-centered giving. She's the founder of the Townsend Collaborative, former Chief Impact Officer of the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Family Philanthropies, and now a Bridgespan Fellow with their Racial Equity in Philanthropy team. Nicole's work surfaces and contextualizes Black philanthropic traditions and mutual aid ecosystems, aiming to transform the field and catalyze more equitable practices. We're thrilled to have her here to share insights, stories, and guidance for our church leaders and nonprofit professionals. So, Nicole, welcome to the Church Law Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to the conversation.
We're so honored to have you. And before we dive into the questions, can you share a bit about your journey and what inspires your passion for faith-driven philanthropy? When I was doing some research on you, I found that you were a fifth grade teacher. And as a mom, my youngest son is in fifth grade, and you have some powerful history with education, both how it impacted you and your brother, I've heard you share, as well as your beliefs around how important education is for everyone. So when we talk about equity, which can be a bit of a firebrand word right now, we're really talking about making sure, especially those who have not had access to education and other important tools have that access. So I would love to hear more about what brings you to this work of philanthropy.
Sure. So, as a person of faith, as a Christian, I believe that God gives potential equally to all of the people that he creates. And when I say equally, it's obviously there's diversity within sort of what our gifts and talents are, but I see no evidence that he would give academic ability to one particular group, racial group, economic group. I don't believe that. I don't think there's any scriptural evidence for that. And so I think what we see happen is we have just a society that's broken and fallen and systems that are unequal that then end up perpetuating certain groups of kids are getting access to better public schools, literally based on the zip code they grow up in. And that impacts the results that those kids see and have in life. And so from my lens, I had two parents who both graduated from college. My mother was an early childhood education major, so she really got me and my brother tight and right very early on. She and my dad prioritized that in part because they were blessed, right, to have the ability to know more about the system than perhaps another parent might have. They cared just as much about, us as did everyone else in our neighborhood, but they charted a path for us that led both my brother and I to go to an exam public high school that was a largely Black high school in Detroit with Black teachers. 99% of us went on to colleges, pretty elite institutions, and have been largely successful, at least in the professional and academic setting. So I know that that was not the case for everyone in Detroit, and we certainly didn't have the same resources that a lot of kids in the suburbs had. And that really fueled for me this desire combined with my faith to work on trying to ensure that every kid, every family has an equal opportunity in life. Again, as a Christian, I think part of what we're called to do is to work on behalf of those who have the least. And I see this as a direct extension of that. So all of those things have really combined to shape the journey that I've had professionally and personally.
I love that so much. The sentiment, which I believe is absolutely biblically correct and consistent with the life that Jesus lived, as much as I could tell about caring for the least of these, right? So I really love that sentiment so much. My mom was also an educator. She was an administrator at a high school. And it was amazing just to see the devotion, how much kids wanted to perform well
Mhm.
because she demonstrated frankly, an expectation. And she really put grace toward that expectation. I can't, she probably can't even tell you how many kids she helped to be able to pay to,
Mhm.
for their applications, right? For the college applications
Sure.
or
Sure.
all these kinds of things that are barriers to so many. And why is that important on the Church Law podcast? Because people may say,
Mhm.
Erika, you're going out on left field here. No, so many of the churches that I have a blessing to work with, they either have a school, right? So a church run school, or they are looking to ensure that they can have the legacy of the next generation stand up and serve in their churches. And we can only do that if we are really actively serving the younger generation where
Right.
they are. Do you
Right.
see that connection?
I do. And I think there's a huge role for the church to play in whether it's being advocates for policy change in their local, school district to ensure that perhaps funding is more equitable for lower income school districts in their state, to developing partnerships with local public schools to serve as tutors and mentors. There's some wonderful ways and existing programs for congregations to get involved on that level. And then even within their own congregation, you likely have a wide range of families, right? Even in well resourced and more affluent neighborhoods, there are going to be a wide range of families who have access, knowledge, the ability to pay for college, right? There are a lot of ways that congregations can get involved to ensure that not only the kids in our community have the spiritual nourishment they need, which of course is first and foremost, but we're also living a life on this planet, right? And I used to say, gosh, what if the God-given purpose of the child, down the street or in a lower income neighborhood is to be an engineer that will then, he or she will go on to create something amazing and, just have a life that impacts, thousands of others. But if that child has a math education, they're going to graduate from high school perhaps with a seventh grade math ability, that purpose is thwarted. And obviously God is awesome and he will find a way, right,
Mhm.
to ensure that child can flourish. But gosh, like what a wasted opportunity that we have have the blessing to step into and support as churches to help bridge some of those gaps where we can.
So let me just say again, speak into the role of the church. I think I heard you mention on another podcast you were on about being raised in the AME church.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had the blessing of serving a number of churches that are part of that amazing faith tradition. And also, I have had the opportunity to help churches. One of our webinars that we did some months ago was about how to properly structure a um, scholarship program that your church may have, right? So, from a legal standpoint, again, if you have this heart of service,
Yeah.
if you believe that God wants to ensure that even the least of these, and perhaps even more so than even, but maybe focusing, right, giving heightened recognition to those widows, to the orphans, right? God was very clear about where He wanted our energy to go, and so if we see young people. If we want to make sure that young people can live to the best of their ability, I think having a church run scholarship program is a great way to do that. And that seems to really tie into the philanthropy mission, at least as I
Mm-hmm.
see it, that you've had in the past. So, can you share about what I see you as both a strategist and a faith driven leader? Like, what has influenced your leadership approach throughout your career?
Sure. So I made the leap from working in the nonprofit leadership sector, so served in C-suite roles in national education groups after my experience as a teacher, and then going to graduate school. Started an education advocacy organization that the Expectations Project, that's focused on supporting congregations nationally to take a role in advocating for more effective policies at the state, local, and federal level for public schools, particularly for low income public schools. But I during that time, I raised a lot of money from foundations and philanthropists and see the benefit and the power of philanthropy and the impact that you can have. And I was very interested in sort of taking those lessons as a nonprofit leader. I think we are well equipped to think about how and where to give resources from a philanthropic lens because we've been in the executive director seat. And so I was fortunate to take those experiences to philanthropy and do more of the same, right? To really look at an equity lens of, and again, I know that's a loaded word. I don't know quite how it has become one, but I just see that as an opportunity lens, right? If that it makes it more clear for folks. But philanthropy has an opportunity to look at where are people and systems in our society struggling the most, and how do we provide resources to help improve the lives and the systems where we can. And so that's the lens I bring to philanthropy as well. I think that's, the sort of root of philanthropy is to essentially make the world better. I know that's a cliche, but I mean, even the very roots of the word philanthropy are
Mhm.
about love of men, love of humans and humankind. And that's what drives me. I think as a believer, as a Christian, I'm fortunate to have, a lot of generous Christians in my life that also, either work in philanthropy, are philanthropists themselves. And I just, again, see this as a huge avenue to be able to advance the causes that honestly that break the heart of God from a Christian lens. And we have an unequal distribution of wealth in the world. This is not a secret, right? And so those who have been blessed generously, again, a biblical principle, I think there's a lot required to try to improve the lives of others in the best
Yeah.
way. Yeah,
That's so powerful. I think about the scripture that says, "To whom much is given, much is required,"
absolutely.
and I pair that with something that one of my best friends said. She said that it's really she and her husband have positioned themselves such that they want to be able to give from the saucer, right? You think about the cup overflowing,
Mhm.
so the overflow, they want to live off the saucer and give away the cup, right? So
Mm-hmm.
really that generosity, to me, when I think about generosity, the church is the epitome of where I learned generosity and where frankly the expectation of generosity was laid. Very much
Absolutely.
were taught about tithing. I was taught about giving, the importance, and really when you look at philanthropy, it is the church that certainly in the African American community, that is the central focal point of the giving tradition. And we
Mm-hmm.
want certainly to flow outside of the four walls of the church, but the church has been such a space where we have made a clear message and, dare I say, a clear call to action to give so that we can be a blessing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I mean, I saw that growing up. The church I went to, every high school graduate got a scholarship, even if it was just to cover books, right? The congregation made sure that if we were going off to college, they supported us. And it was just, it's very communal, I think, through the Black church and through many other churches as well, but also throughout, I think, the African American community. When a community has had historic challenges, those communities find ways to persevere. And that's usually by supporting each other. And we see that time and time again throughout history. And it's not that these communities don't want other allies to help support their same causes. And I think that's definitely needed. Certainly in our very pluralistic country, we need a lot of that.
Mhm.
But to your point, I think the church itself is, and particularly the Black church, that's my personal experience, is absolutely an example of what philanthropy and true community care can look like. And I guess I would say, we look at philanthropy and think of, gosh, the multimillionaires and the billionaires, and it's all of us, right? We all have a role to play, and I tend to work, more closely with those who have been very blessed with significant resources just in my day job. But the idea that I should be giving more than I probably am is something that constantly is what I think about, and I think God is challenging us to do that. And even for me personally, examining, well, how much do you really need, right,
Mhm.
to live on? And what is that about, right? Just the consumerism is real in our society. And I think we have an obligation to fight against that a bit. And this is, my own personal opinion, but I think as we think about this work of philanthropy, I guess I would just call us to, it's not just the person that has, tens of millions of dollars. That's a philanthropist. That's all of us.
I love that so much. And it really makes me think about my church, that I don't know that I'd seen this at any other church that we've attended. I mean, we were at churches for a long time, so there aren't many, but my church sent us a giving statement like mid-year.
Hmm.
And to your exact point, my husband and I have giving goals, and looking at the giving statement, I was like, let's increase this.
Yeah.
So if your church, I just want to put this out there, if your church just sends giving statements once a year,
Yeah.
which certainly that's
Sure.
fine because
That's a
that's
great point.
that's most typical. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So you get them out by January, right? By the January 30th of the
Before
subsequent
before
year.
tax
So
year, tax
yeah,
season, right?
exactly. Then that you're certainly meeting your obligation. But I
Sure.
just want to make a pitch for maybe giving that mid-year update so that people can take a look and see, as you said, Nicole, like I want to make sure that I'm giving at my highest ability, at my highest level. And we also auto give. So it was a great opportunity to be like, yeah, I hadn't even gone in here to tweak this at all. Let me go in here and make an update so that we can really try to outgive our prior.
Hmm. Hmm. Yep. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for pastors and church leaders that are listening in, like what lessons can they take from your work to better engage their congregation in what the language that I'm pulling from you is kind of this equity focused giving.
Yeah, I think the beauty of having a congregation and having you have this captive audience really on a regular basis to start to talk about the issues that are coming up either in your church's community and the neighborhood or even within the congregation, right? To really start to speak about. So here are 3 or 4 giving areas that have surfaced over the last year. We've prayed about this. We've had discussions with our neighbors, with our congregation, and we want to lean into this. And so this is not a you have to give to these areas. We certainly know that we need to take care of the church and the church's needs, but the church can also set up an additional fund, perhaps, or some type of pooled giving fund to say we want to lean in on supporting new moms or moms who have financial challenges, right? Or kids and who don't have access to preschool. We want to start a scholarship fund to make sure that kids can get high quality preschool, which is a game changer to making sure they're ready for kindergarten. And above and beyond what you give to the church, this is a way for us to collectively give and being super transparent. This is where we're going to give this money, an existing organization, an existing, high capacity, well researched. You're going to put a little research into it. Make sure you're going to give to a nonprofit that has great tax status and their financials are all clear. But something that people can rally around, and then you can really see. We raised X amount to give to this phenomenal nonprofit organization that's doing work to help ensure that everyone in our neighborhood has equal opportunities. And the impact that you can have collectively is just a wonderful way to really support what's happening in your community and to lead with this equity lens again on the issues that I believe the Bible's clear that many of these issues just break the heart of God. And we want to be in on the what can we do to make these issues and these life outcomes more effective for our neighbors, for loving our neighbors as we love ourselves.
Amen. Well, I want to again reiterate, you mentioned about the scholarship fund. So I'm going to have my team drop in the show notes that past webinar that we provided on church run scholarships, because there was just, we want to again avoid any legal landmines that could create any issues while providing the insights that could really be a blessing to those in your church. You also mentioned this whole idea of setting money aside, a church setting money aside for a specific purpose. And so when we talk about, I just want to add some language for a designated fund. A designated fund is money that's set aside for a specific purpose rather than the church's general operations. So there are two common kinds from a legal standpoint. One being a donor restricted fund or a donor designated fund. So that's when giver specifies the purpose. Like you mentioned, this is for scholarships or for youth missions or what have you. In that case, the church is legally and certainly ethically obligated to use those dollars only for that
Yes,
purpose or
yes.
to obtain the donor's written release. I just want to make that clear. And in accounting terms, these are net assets with donor restrictions, right? And then the second kind that's most common here when you talk about designated funds is board designated funds. And that's when the board earmarks unrestricted money for a specific purpose. So they may say, these are our operating reserves, for example, or we want to have this for capital replacement. But because leadership created the designation, they can also change or remove it. So I just wanted to identify that from a legal standpoint.
Love that. Yeah. The other thing I would say is if your church does not have the sort of the appetite or resources, capacity to do this type of legal designations, literally have a phenomenal nonprofit leader come and have 5 minutes at the end of your service and talk about what they're doing. We believe this is a great work that's happening in our community. Encourage people to give directly there as well. You can simplify that if that's what the congregation's preference is. And there's lots of ways to do this. And I appreciate the sound legal framework that you're providing, which is very important for our churches as well.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So as we're winding down, it goes so fast. I want to acknowledge the fact that some churches are just trying to get enough to like keep the lights on, right, to cover their operations,
Yeah.
while there's some churches that have an abundance of resources. So how do you speak to those disparate experiences, given your message of philanthropy?
I think there are a couple of ways. One, I really think it's important to empower and remind all of us that regardless of how much we have to give, we still have agency to give and support others. There's something beautiful in calling all of us to do that. It's the widows who gave the two mites, I think it was. And God honored that and said she's given more than any of you, essentially, because she gave basically all that she had. And I'm certainly not, telling people in lower resource churches to do that. I get that we're trying to keep the lights on. So hear me when I say this. I'm just simply saying I think it's disempowering to suggest that just because you are in a community that has fewer resources that you cannot give to others, right? You can. And I think it's very meaningful to do that. And you have to find the ways that, you're most comfortable with. That said, I do think there's something to be said for if you are a very well-resourced congregation, pray about perhaps God is asking you or calling your congregation to help support a couple of other congregations, locally that are struggling. Like that's a wonderful opportunity to help infuse, right, the resources that another congregation may use. And this is usually driven by the economics of the congregation. If you have a church plant purposefully in a lower income community and you're really looking to draw folks from the neighborhood, like that's just the reality of many of those people living in that community. And what's the opportunity to partner in a very healthy, sort of mutually beneficial, culturally appropriate way with another congregation to ensure their needs are met and that they can keep serving their community the way that they want to.
I love that so much. And I just really appreciate your insights now. Last question. If you
Yeah.
could leave church leaders with one message of encouragement, word of encouragement, point of encouragement about generosity, um, what would that be?
Just to continue to call our congregations to generosity. It's a gift. It's not a burden. And when I work with families who have, significant resources to give, or I'm presenting a new idea to them to consider, it's never, gosh, I wonder if they're going to say yes or no to this. I feel bad asking. No, it's actually a beautiful opportunity to invite someone in to being generous for a cause that is going to do good for others. It's just a wonderful, wonderful way to fulfill, I believe, our role and responsibility as followers of Christ.
Well, I love that message, and I appreciate you for joining us today, Nicole, and for your powerful work. Your insights on philanthropy and faith is a critical message for our listeners, and I know that they appreciated hearing from you today. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have a good
You're
one.
very welcome. And to learn more about Nicole's work with Bridgespan and the Townsend Collaborative, we'll include the links in our show notes. Also, be sure to subscribe to the Church Law Podcast for more conversations at the intersection of faith, leadership, and legal wisdom. And if you missed the Church Law and Leadership Summit, you'll have a chance to grab the replay and download your conference companion guide with amazing resources. We'll include a link with a discount code just for you as our podcast listeners. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Bye.